Did you get the message that it's being recorded?
Uh, no, I did not.
Okay. Okay, I believe some other people have got the message, so I see a few thumbs up. Perfect. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. So, hello everyone, and welcome to our PGWP information session for international student at SFU. My name is Jitendra, and I'm an international student advisor, immigration specialist at Simon Fraser University. I will be your presenter today, and it is my great pleasure to be joined by Prerna, who is also an international student advisor. Prerna will be moderating our Q&A session today and keep us on track. Next slide, please. So before we move to today's agenda, I would like to begin by respectfully acknowledging that we are on unceded Coast Salish territory of Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh Nation. We recognize and honor their ongoing connection to this land where we live, learn, and work. If you are interested in learning more about Indigenous history and reconciliation in Canada, I encourage you to explore publicly available resources, including those related to Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's take a quick look at what we will cover today. First, I will briefly introduce the International Services for Students Office and how we support international students at SFU. Then we will review recent PGWP updates announced on December 11th. After that, we'll go through PGWP eligibility requirements, application timelines, required documentation, work authorization rules. Finally, we will spend the remaining time answering your question during the Q&A session. Now, immigration policies can change quickly, so please note that the information shared today is accurate to the best of my knowledge as of March 13, 2026. Next slide, please. At International Service for Student, or ISS, we provide a range of services to support international students during their time at SFU. As International Student Advisor, we provide non-academic advising, including guidance on study permit, work eligibility, co-op work permit, post-graduation work permit, maintaining legal immigration status in Canada. We can also help students understand medical insurance options and navigating the Canadian healthcare system. Next slide, please. So there are several ways to connect with an international student advisor across all three SFU campuses, which is Burnaby, Surrey, and Vancouver. You can reach us through in-person drop-in advising, virtual drop-ins, appointments, email support. Our website is also an important resource. It includes step-by-step immigration guide, which we strongly encourage students to review first when looking for answers to commonly asked questions. Now let's talk about the latest PGWP update. So first, you need to have had valid study authorization at some point within 180 days after completing your program. This also includes students on maintained status who apply to extend their study permit before finishing their program. As a best practice, we recommend counting the 180 days from the date your final grades are officially released. Second, if you were part-time in your final semester and for some reason if you failed a course and needed to retake in order to graduate in the next term, in that scenario, RCC might consider both your semester as your final academic session, as long as you meet all other PGWP eligibility requirements, which we will discuss in the next few slides. And finally, if you applied for your initial study permit before November 1st, 2024, you are not affected by the new field of study requirements, even if you later extended your study permit. However, the field of study requirement does not apply to degree-seeking students, including those in bachelor's, master's, or PhD programs. We will now move on to PGWP overview, eligibility criteria, and application timelines. So to begin with, the post-graduation work permit or PGWP is an open work permit, which means you do not need a job offer or employer support to apply. To qualify, you must have completed an eligible program at designated learning institutes such as SFU, maintain full-time status for most of your studies with limited exceptions such as final term or an authorized leave, and apply within 180 days of completing your program. You also need to have held valid study authorization at some point during that 180-day period. In addition to meeting RCC eligibility requirements, you must also meet your institution program completion requirement. For example, receiving your final grades and confirmation of graduation. RCC assess your application based on official documentation, such as your final transcript and credential completion letter, so timing and documentation are very important. Now let's talk about the application fee that you need to pay when you submit your PGWP application. The PGWP application fee is 255 Canadian dollars, which includes 155 work permit fee and $100 for open work permit fee. There might be some additional costs such as biometrics or medical examination depending on your unique situation. One very important point, you can only receive a PGWP once in your lifetime, so you won't be able to extend or apply for it for the second time. Next slide, please. So to be able to apply for post-graduation work permit, you need to meet certain criteria. So for example, graduate from designated learning institute, such as SFU, complete a program that is at least 8 months long, maintain full-time enrollment for most of your program, with some exception, as I mentioned just earlier, your final academic term or an approved leave of absence. You must also apply within 180 days of completing your program. There is also a new requirement if you're applying for your PGWP on or after November 1st, 2024, you also need to include language tests with your application. And you should not have had a post-graduation work permit in the past, as you can only get your post-graduation work permit once in a lifetime. Next slide, please. So one of the most important eligibility requirement, as we discussed in the last slide, is maintaining full-time status throughout your program. So if you were part-time or took a break from your program, it is important to review your situation carefully. So first, check whether your situation falls under an RCC exception, such as a final term, regularly scheduled break, or an authorized leave. Next, check your enrollment history so you can clearly understand when and why your status changed. So for example, if you're part-time and if your situation does not fall into any of those exceptions, final term, authorized leave, or a scheduled break, so in that case, you should prepare a letter of explanation for IRCC that outline your situation along with any supporting documentation, such as medical notes or military service letter. However, your situation could be different, so depending upon your situation, why you might be part-time, why you might have taken a term off, include documentation along with your letter of explanation. You may also choose to connect with International Student Advisor for guidance. Keep in mind that while advisor, we are able to help you prepare your application, it is IRCC which will make the final decision on your application. With that, I would also like to clarify that at SFU, for undergrad, spring and fall are considered academic terms, and for graduate student, spring, summer, and fall all are considered academic terms. Next slide, please. Now, when you prepare your PGWP application, you would need following documentation. Application form. So IMM 5710 is the main application form that you need to fill out for your PGWP application. In addition to that, you would need to include your passport. For your passport, you would need to include all the pages which have a stamp, either for Canada or for any other country. You would need to include a photo, and photograph should not be more than 6 months old. You would also need to include language scores as they were introduced in November 2024. From SFU, you would need two documentation to demonstrate that you have successfully graduated from your program, which could be through completion letter. The, the completion letter is basically means the credential completion letter or standard letter. You can use either of those documents to apply for PGWP. In addition to that, you would also need to include your final transcript. Again, final transcript does not have to be official. You can also use unofficial copy of your transcript for your PGWP application. Additionally, depending on your situation, you may also need a medical exam or letter of explanation, especially if you do not meet any of the criteria for PGWP application, as we discussed in the previous slide. Always review your personalized IRCC checklist, as documentation requirement may vary by country. So for example, for certain countries, you might need to fill out family information form. Next slide, please. When applying for post-graduation work permit or PGWP, there are two important timelines that every student should understand. The first timeline is PGWP application window. Students have 180 days to apply for PGWP. This 180 days start from when your final grade or thesis grade is posted on your GoSFU account. And the second timeline is your study permit validity. And this is where students often get confused. So if you want to apply for post-graduation work permit from inside of Canada, your study permit should be valid at the time you apply or submit your application. So according to IRCC guidelines, your study permit is considered valid until whichever comes first. So it could be either 90 days after you receive your first official notification, which is credential completion letter in SFU scenario, or the expiry date printed on your study permit. Now remember, it is the first of the following. So again, 90 days after you receive a completion letter or the expiration date printed on your study permit, whichever comes earlier. So students need to pay attention to both dates, the 90-day period after completion and the expiry date on their study permit. In some situation, student may still be within 180 days PGWP application window, but their study permit might no longer be valid. So if that happens, students generally have two options. You can change your status to visitor in order to stay in Canada, or you can leave Canada and apply for post-graduation work permit from outside Canada. So the key takeaway here is always monitor both the 180-day PGWP application window and the validity of your study permit. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I know many of you have questions about working before and after your PGWP application, and this is one of the most submitted questions during registration. So let's discuss that. If you were eligible to work during your final term, then you can continue to work until your credential completion letter is available to download. Now, it is important to note that you will not receive any notification when your CCL would be available. So you might want to check with your department advisor about the approximate timeline when the CCL or the credential completion letter would be available. Once the CCL is ready to download from GoSFU account, you must stop working. So this is what also the graph on this page shows, that you can, like after your final grades are posted or thesis grade is posted, you can continue to work until your credential completion letter is available, provided you were eligible to work in your final term. Once you receive your CCL, you must stop working. After you submit your PGWP application, you can start working full-time again as long as you meet the eligibility requirement. So there are a couple of requirements that you need to meet to be able to work full-time after you submit your PGWP application. So you must have had a valid study permit when you submit your application. You were eligible to work off campus in your final term, and you did not exceed allowable hours of work during your academic terms. So, for example, if you were eligible to work 24 hours, you did not work 25 hours or 26 hours, right? So, if you meet all the three criteria, you would be able to work full time after you submit your PGWP application. So now that we have covered eligibility timelines and work requirements, let's move on to PGWP application tutorial. In this part, I'll walk you through the application step by step using IRCC portal, so you'd feel comfortable doing this on your own later. Before we start the application, we need to generate a document checklist. There are two ways to do that. One option is to use the Come to Canada tool on the IRCC website. You answer a few eligibility questions, receive a personal reference code, and then enter that code into your IRCC secure account to generate the checklist. The second option is to create the checklist directly by logging to your IRCC secure account. So this is the option we will be using today. If you would like to follow along, please go ahead and log into your IRCC account now. I'll give everyone a moment to do that. I will also share a link to log into your IRCC account in case you would like to follow along. So we have shared a link in your chat. If you already have an account, please log in. I'll just give you a few minutes to do that. Okay, so I'll continue. To let us know in case you need longer time, you can just raise your hand. Okay, so I'll give you a few more seconds to log into your account. Okay, so let's go through this application together. Next slide, please, Fred. Sorry, can you please go back to the previous one? Sorry. Okay, so once you log into your account, you see this screen, right? So you would need to click on Visitor Visa, Study, or Work Permit. So click on that. Next slide, please. So once you do that, you will come across this screen where you would need to answer a series of questions to generate the checklist. So let's go through those questions together. So what would you like to do in Canada? So you would choose work as you're applying for your post-graduation work permit. How long are you planning to stay in Canada? So you would choose temporary, more than 6 months, as PGWP is a temporary resident document that allows you to stay in Canada for a temporary basis. Next, choose the country of your passport. So in this example, I've chosen India, but choose the country of your citizenship or the country which issued your passport. So for this application, we are focusing on inside of Canada application. For your next question, what is the current country or territory of residence? To choose Canada, as we are assuming that you would be submitting your application from inside Canada. The next question is, do you have family member who is Canadian citizen or PR at 18 years or older? From the immigration perspective, family member would mean your spouse, common law partner, or dependent children. So right now we're assuming that you don't have any family member who meet this definition. So choose no. Next, enter your date of birth. And the next question would be, are you a lawful PR of United States with a valid US citizenship or immigration services number? So choose accordingly. If you are a PR of USA, you could say yes. If that does not apply to you, please choose no for this question. Okay. So for the next question, what is your current immigration status in Canada? So you're applying for your post-graduation work permit being a student in Canada. So choose your status to be student. Next question, do you plan to work on campus? Choose no for that because we are applying for post-graduation work permit, right? Your study permit already have the authorization that allows you to work on and off campus. So next question would be, are you a full-time student at a participating post-secondary and want to work off campus? Choose no, since you would be applying for post-graduation work permit once you have graduated, so you are no longer a full-time student. So response to next question would be yes. Have you recently graduated from a participating Canadian post-secondary institute for which your study permit was full-time and a minimum of 8 months? Since you graduated from your program from SFU and your program was 8 months or longer, choose yes to that. Is your work an essential part of your program or studies? Choose no, as you have graduated and that's why you're applying for PGWP. Next slide, please. Okay, so when you go to next screen, you will be seeing this question. Have you been told by RCC that you approved in principle for PR in Canada? So if you applied for PR and you have been approved, you could say yes, but right now I'm choosing no. Have you submitted a PR application in Canada? Again, if you have submitted a PR application, choose yes. So choose yes or no depending upon your situation. To have a written job offer. Now I'm going to choose no because if you remember, we discussed PGWP is an open work permit, which means you do not need a job offer to apply for it. So even if you have a job offer, choose no to that question. So next would be, do you have an official letter from your school that confirms you have completed your program as well as copy of your final transcript? We also discussed before, to apply for PGWP, you would need credential completion letter or Senate letter. So that's when you can apply for PGWP. So we're assuming you already got that document, choose yes in response to that question. Next would be this question, what is your marital status? Again, choose according to your marital situation. What is your province or territory of residence? So I'm choosing British Columbia, but if you are in some other province, you can choose that province. However, it does not impact where you would be able to work in Canada, since PGWP is an open work permit which allows you to work anywhere for any eligible employer in Canada. So choosing a province does not restrict you to a particular location. Next slide, please. So once you answer those questions, you will come across this screen. Since we're applying for post-graduation work permit, you can continue in front of post-graduation work permit and move to next page. Okay, so you'll see some of the questions are kind of repeated. So again, do you have an official letter that confirm you have completed your program? Again, say yes to that question. Have you had a medical exam performed by RCC authorized physician within the last 12 months? So that depends on your situation. In case you recently applied for any immigration document, and as a part of that, if you underwent a medical exam that was performed by RCC authorized physician within the last 1 year, choose yes. If not, choose no, and click on next. Next screen, please. Next slide, please. Okay. So now if you see, in some situation, you might need to undergo a medical examination. So let's discuss these criteria. So if you want to stay in Canada for more than 6 months and lived in one of the designated countries for more than 6 months in the past 1 year. So if you lived in any of the designated countries, for example, such as India, China are one of the designated country, you can click on that list and then you will see able to see the list of all designated country. If you spent more than 6 months in those country in the last 1 year, you would say you would fit the criteria and you would need to say yes. Or, for example, if you want to work in any of these following occupation, like health sciences worker, teacher of primary or secondary school, day nursery worker. So if any of those situations applies to you, say yes. If not, choose no. Now, do you want to submit an application for a family member? So I'm going to choose no, because if you remember initially I said I don't have any family member, but there might be a situation where you might have a spouse or children, and if you want to submit application for them, you might say yes, but we'll discuss if your spouse is eligible to apply for work permit in the subsequent slide. So next page, please. Okay. So next would be, are you giving someone access to your application? If you would be submitting your application on your own, you could say no to that question. So last question is, in the last 10 years, have you given fingerprints and photo, which is known in biometrics, for application to come to Canada? If you have given your biometrics in the last 10 years, since they are considered valid for 10 years, you can say yes. If not, you can say no. We also discuss there's an application fee of $255 for PGWP application. So you can say, yes, I would be paying my application fee in response to there are fees associated with this application. Will you be paying your fee or are you fee exempt? So you can say you would pay your application fee. Next slide, please. Okay, and some of the last question is, are you able to make copy of your documents? So yes. And how would you pay application fee? So would you be paying application using credit card, debit card, etc.? Choose yes. So once you do that, you would be able to review the answer to your questions. And in case you need to make any changes, you see this pencil icon towards the right hand of your screen, right? So you can click on it and you would be able to make changes in case you answer something incorrectly, or if your situation changes, you need to make changes, right? Next slide, please. Okay, so once you click on next and next, you will see that the checklist has been generated for you. So as I mentioned, the document that you need to apply for your application first is your application form, IMM 5710. Then you need to provide these documentation, your final transcript, your completion letter or your Senate letter, copy of your passport, your photograph, and the client information is, so if you remember, I mentioned that effective November 1st, 2024, you also need to include language score with your application, but there is no dedicated field to upload copy of your language score. So you must upload your language score in the client information section. Also, in case you do not meet any of the criteria for PGWP application, for example, full-time enrollment in your program, and you want to include letter of explanation, that must also be uploaded under client information. So you can see you can only upload one file under client information. So if you have multiple files, you would need to join them and upload them as a single file. So for example, if you need to include letter of explanation plus language scores, so you can combine these files and upload as a single document under client information section. Next slide, please. So we will also briefly go through the application form 5710, which you need to complete as a part of your PGWP application. So if you open your application form, it looks like that. So for example, first of all, UCI, unique client information. So you can find UCI number on your study permit. Okay. And then the question number 3, I'm applying for one of the following. So you see 4 options: applying for work permit with same employer, restoring my status as a worker, apply for work permit for the first time or with a new employer, get a new temporary resident permit for inadmissible applicant only. For post-graduation work permit, you will choose the highlighted option. Apply for work permit for the first time or with a new employer. So I see some of the question in the chat. So we will be discussing question during the Q&A after this. So I'll not go through the entire application form because some of the application is just your personal information, like your full name, your date of birth, place of birth, etc. So let's go to question number 7, country of residence. So again, we are focusing of inside of Canada application. So you will choose a country of residence to be Canada, your status, student, and then from, you will, in the from section, you will mention the issue date of your first study permit. And for 2, you will mention the expiry date of your current study permit. So in case you extended your study permit, you will put the issue date of your first study permit and the 2, the expiry of your most recent study permit. Next slide, please. Okay. So one of the section on your application, you would see details of intended work in Canada. So what type of work permit are you applying for? If you drop down the menu, you will see a couple of options. So you will choose post-graduation work permit. Now, post-graduation work permit, again, as I mentioned, is open work permit, which allows you to work for any employer anywhere in Canada. So you can leave under question number 2 to A, B blank. You can also leave 3 blank. For question number 4, my occupation Canada will be, under job title, you can just say as assigned. Brief description of your duties as assigned, because you would be able to work for any employer, right? So it could be any job title, it could be any job responsibilities. You can either leave them blank or you could just say as assigned, as assigned. You can leave 5 blank, you can leave 6 blank, you can leave 7 blank. For question number 8, have you applied or issued a certificate under provincial nomination program? If you applied for PNP or Prevention Nomination Program, if you have received nomination under that category of application, choose yes, otherwise choose no. Next slide, please. Okay, so now if you go to education section, it asks you, have you had any post-secondary, university, college, or apprentice training? Choose yes and provide the details of your highest post-secondary education. So for example, if the degree that you completed at SFU is the highest post-secondary, you can mention details of your degree under education section. But if you have a highest degree from any other institute, then you need to mention details of that because it's the highest post-secondary. For employment, if you are employed, then you can just mention details of your employment. But in case you don't have a job offer, you cannot leave the first entry under employment blank. So in that case, you can mention your current activity to be recent graduate, looking for employment. Under company name, you could put not applicable, and then city, country, depending upon the location where you're staying. For the from date with the date when you graduated from your program. So for example, if you graduated in fall 2025, you would mention 2025 12, or if you would be graduating this term, then that could be 2026 April. Now, if you also see under background question, particularly under question number 2, have you previously applied to enter or remain in Canada? So you would need to say yes, because you are already in Canada on a study permit, which basically means you applied for an immigration document in the past, right? So for example, let's say if I applied for first study permit in 2021, and if it applied for extension in 2023, then I could say something like that. Applied for first study permit in 2021, applied for extension of study permit and visa in 2023, approved. If you applied 2 times, then you could mention those duration. Next slide, please. So once you complete the application form, you would need to click on validate. So the forms which give you the option to validate, the signature and date is not mandatory. So you can leave signature and date mandatory and click on validate. Once you click on validate, it will generate a series of barcodes, an additional page of barcodes for your application form. You can always make changes to your application form even after you have validated. But in case you're making changes, make sure that you're validating form every time you're making any changes to your form. So the most recent changes are captured in the validation, or the recent or the most updated form that you would be uploading on the IRCC website. Next slide, please. Okay. So that was all about the application tutorial. I hope you were able to follow along in case you were doing that. If not, I hope that you found it useful when you would apply for your post-graduation work permit. Now, some question, like sometimes we get question from student, what length of post-graduation work permit I will receive? So when we talk about the length of post-graduation work permit, it really depends on your program. Undergrad program or non-master program, if your program is 8 months to less than 2 years, then your post-graduation work permit is usually the same length as your program. If your program is 2 years or longer, you may be eligible for 3 years of post-graduation work permit. Now, bachelor degree program at SFU are 4 years in length. So based on that, you would qualify for 3 years of post-graduation work permit. For master's program that are at least 8 months long, RCC allows applicant to apply for 3 years of post-graduation work permit. even if the program is less than 2 years. So this only applies to full master's degree, not certificate or diplomas. Also remember that RCC make the final decision, and your passport validity can affect the duration of your post-graduation work permit. So for example, in case you are eligible for 3 years of post-graduation work permit, but if your passport is expiring in next 2 years, you will receive 2 years of post-graduation work permit, as the work permit cannot be issued beyond the validity of your passport. Next slide, please. So this slide explains eligibility for spousal open work permit after graduation. Once the student holds a valid post-graduation work permit or is in the process of applying for PGWP. Now, a spouse or common law partner may be eligible to apply for an open work permit. However, eligibility is not automatic and depends on meeting specific RCC requirement. The most important factor is PGWP holder's employment. The principal applicant is the one who is applying for post-graduation work permit. The principal applicant must be working or have a job offer in eligible Tier 01 or selected Tier 2-3 occupation at the time the spouse application is submitted. So if the PGWP holder does not have eligible job offer or working in any of the above tier categories when applying for PGWP, the spouse or common law partner may not apply at the same time and must wait until the PGWP is approved and the principal applicant have secured an eligible job. Timing and permit validity are also critical. The post-graduation work permit must be valid for at least 16 months when IRCC receives the spousal open work permit application, and proof of genuine spousal or common law relationship must be provided. Dependent children are not eligible for open work permit under this policy. However, if they are studying, they would be able to apply for study permit or extend their already study permit. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay. So sometimes we receive a lot of questions if students can travel while they're waiting for a decision on their post-graduation work permit. And the answer is yes. You can travel outside of Canada after submitting your PGWP application. However, there are a few important things to keep in mind. First, you need valid travel documents, such as passport and a valid visitor visa, student visa or ETA to return to Canada. Remember that a study permit or work permit is not a travel visa. Border officer will review your documents and make the final decision on entry to Canada. If you plan to travel outside of Canada while waiting for your decision on your PGWP, it is also a good idea to carry a proof that you submitted your PGWP application. And the proof could be acknowledgement. So when you submit your application, you will receive an acknowledgement from IRCC that they have received your application. So you can print it and carry it along with your passport and valid visa or ETA when you come back to Canada. Next slide, please. So we mentioned in the beginning that we won't be covering about PR in Canada, but we want to discuss, in case you would be applying for PR in Canada, what kind of experience you would be able to use your permanent residency in Canada. So many students ask whether work experience gained on PGWP can help with permanent residency. The answer is yes. In many cases, it can. So work experience gained while working on PGWP can count toward PR, especially to the Canadian Experience class under Express Entry. However, the work experience must meet a few key IRCC requirements. First, the work must be paid and done while you were legally authorized to work in Canada. such as while holding a PGWP work permit. Second, the job offer must be in skilled occupation, which means tier 0, 1, 2, or 3 category. Third, you must have at least 1 year of skilled work experience, which is equivalent to 1,560 hours of full-time work or equivalent in part-time work. Finally, the experience must be gained after graduation and while you have valid work authorization. For Canadian experience class, any experience that you gained on a study permit is not counted. So overall, the PGWP is important because it allows graduates to gain Canadian skilled work experience, which can help them qualify for permanent residence through the Canadian experience class. Next slide, please. It is also important to understand that not all work experience count for permanent residence under the Canadian experience class, as discussed in the last slide. For example, work done while you were on a study permit usually does not count, even if it was paid or part-time. Self-employment also does not qualify for the Canadian experience class. In addition, your work experience must be properly documented, such as employer reference letter and pay stubs. Now remember, we are only talking about the Canadian experience class. There might be other categories where if you work as a student might be useful. So some helpful tips. Your PGWP allows you to work full-time, which helps you gain the skilled work experience required for your PR. You can also combine full-time and part-time work to reach the required 1 year of experience or 1,560 hours. Next slide, please. So if you're looking for detailed information on PR in Canada, then there you can attend one of the information session by BC Newcomer Services Program. So when we send an email to a registered participant for this session, we will also include details of these sessions so you can register and attend any of those sessions. Next slide, please. Now, let's some tips for your post-graduation work permit. Sorry, the heading says tips for your study permit, but it's tips for your post-graduation work permit. To remember to apply within 180 days of finishing your program. Make sure you have all your documents ready, your transcript, completion letter, passport, and language test. Your passport should be valid for the entire duration of your PGWP to avoid a shorter work permit. Also check your biometrics validity. For example, if your biometrics are only valid for the next 2 years, your PGWP might be limited to 2 years, even though you may be eligible for 3 years of post-graduation work permit. Complete any required medical exam in case they are required as a part of your application. And if you are unsure about anything about the post-graduation work permit application, SFU resources or an ISS advisor would be able to help with your application. Next slide, please. So these are some of the resources we are going to include as a part of our email that we'll be sending in a couple of days. Next slide, please. So I also want to talk about the medical insurance. So as of May 1, 2022, international students in British Columbia who have applied for PGWP and are on maintained status while waiting for a decision may be eligible for up to 6 months of temporary MSP coverage. If processing takes longer than 6 months, additional temporary coverage might also be available. Student must request this coverage by submitting the required documentation, such as proof of PGWP submission and maintained status through the MSP online portal. Next slide, please. Okay, with this, thank you so much for sticking with us today. I know that we covered a lot. and we really appreciate you being here and staying engaged throughout. We will now move into our Q&A. I'm going to stop the recording in just a moment. So if you're watching the recording, thank you for joining us. We hope to see you again at a future workshop or in one-on-one advising. And before you go, we would really appreciate if you could take time to fill out the feedback survey, for which I would share the link in the chat. Let us know what worked well in this session and how we can make this session even better.